Distinguished invited guests, my good friend, former National Security Minister, media practitioners here present, ladies and gentlemen. Permit me to extend my sincere gratitude to the organizers of this policy dialogue series, and particularly to the chairman, my distinguished lecturer and former Speaker of the Ghana Parliament, Professor Mike Aaron Okoye, for inviting me to be part of this policy dialogue and to share my views on this critical and important topic. I do not take the invitation lightly at all, considering that I do not have any pretensions to being an expert on the topic. Be it as it may, I hope the views expressed in this presentation will add to the discussions and the search for a solution out of our repeated return to the IMF for bailouts. Since we have been bailed out by the IMF 17 times within the past 40 years out of our 68 years of existence as a country. Mr. Chairman, a couple of weeks ago, on the 20th day of October 2025, a new mine, the Ahafo mine, was officially commissioned by the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, Her Excellency, Jane Nana Opukwajiman, in the company of His Majesty Otumfo Osei-Tutu II, and the Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, among others. In her speech, the Vice President said, and I quote, "As we look to the future, let us be guided by a fundamental principle. The extraction of our mineral resources must always serve a higher national purpose. We must ensure that for every pit dug beneath the earth, a commensurate infrastructural legacy should rise in its place. The wealth drawn from the depths must be translated into schools, hospitals, and opportunities that will lift our communities upwards. This is not merely a policy. It is a fundamental principle. These resources are national blessings to be managed for the benefit of all, not private windfalls for a few," unquote. Distinguished participants, it is important to remind ourselves that this discussion is being held within the framework of Ghana's worrying relationship with the IMF. Indiscipline, recklessness, wastage, corruption, incompetence, policy failures or absence of policy, and many more have led us to the IMF on so many times for bailouts of sorts. Like a spoiled child, we keep returning to our supposed benefactor to mitigate our hardship with a promise to reorder our affairs and become useful and responsible. But the history of our country and its leaders tell a different story. The question that begs the answer is, Can Ghana find respite in our mineral resources, leverage these assets through purposiveness and intentionality to prevent a return to the IMF? Ladies and gentlemen, I have deliberately described our natural resources as assets to bring home to us the invidious responsibility of managing them prudently. They are non-renewable assets. That is why they are extracted. When they are depleted, they are lost. And so we must have a framework that enables us to track the tangible benefits of its exploitation. Mr. Chairman, this paper will attempt to answer to the vexed question by looking at Ghana's mining history, the legal and regulatory frameworks regulating mining in Ghana, the policy behind mining seen through the Ghana mining vision and the African mining vision, discuss the experiences of other countries in the management of their natural resources and what lessons we can draw from them. I will also touch on the sub-themes of the topic and bring this discussion to a conclusion by arguing that a sustainable and equitable mining future for Ghana necessitates a fundamental reimagining of the agreements that we sign, moving beyond mere revenue distribution towards a model of genuine partnership, shared values, and local involvement. That's the prelude. The introduction. Mining has deep historical roots in Ghana, dating back to pre-colonial times, where indigenous people used rudimentary tools to exploit our mineral resources in ravines, water bodies, and tributaries. Mining took on a formalized structure in or around 1897 with the establishment of the first mining company in Obuasi by the Europeans. Ghana has a well-established mining sector which has grown and expanded consistently in recent years and represents a strong and important pillar in the Ghanaian economy. The mining industry employs a significant number of Ghanaians, both in the formal and informal sectors. And in the formal sector, about 28,000 people are employed in mining. In the informal sector, more than 1 million people are involved. Beyond domestic tax, mining exports were the largest source of foreign exchange in 2024. In 2024, generating 11.9 billion and accounting for 58.4% of our gross merchandise export earnings. Indeed, in 2012, mining contributed 37% to government revenue through domestic tax. It is therefore fair to say that Ghana's natural resources, particularly gold and oil, are crucial to the economic development of our country. However, despite the contribution of mining to the economy of Ghana and the significant investment in the mining sector since the days of the mining sector reforms, there has been growing disquiet on the benefits the country is deriving from the exploitation of our natural resources. The general perception is often that the benefits are skewed towards foreign interests rather than national interests. According to George Soros, contributing to a debate on the issue, there are three kinds of asymmetry that might be responsible for this state of affairs. Namely, asymmetry of information, asymmetry of agency, and asymmetry of bargaining power. In fact, on my way here, the former governor of the Bank of Ghana, after pre-reading my speech, added asymmetry of production. And he explains that to mean the technology that is needed to extract our natural resources. The preamble of the 1992 Constitution of the Republic of Ghana begins with a declaration of the Universal Creed. We, the people. And continues to state, in exercise of our natural and inalienable right to establish a framework of government which has secured for us, or for ourselves and posterity, the blessings of liberty, equality of opportunity, and prosperity, on the principle that all powers of government spring from the sovereign will of the people. Article 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution elevates this declaration into a duty when it provides that the powers of government are to be exercised in a manner that seeks the welfare of the people of Ghana. The powers of government must be exercised in a manner that seeks our welfare. You must know that. Article 257, Clause 6, therefore creates a trust relationship between the government and the people of Ghana. Since natural resources of the state are vested in the president for and on behalf of the people, in trust for and on behalf of the people of Ghana. And Article 298 defines the executive authority of state to be the power with which government exercises its authority. So when you read Article 298, together with Article 58 of the Constitution, which is the executive authority of state, you will be left to no doubt that the president is government, and government is the president. So vesting our natural resources in the president, in trust for us, is vesting it in the government to be held in trust for us. Mining companies need to obtain concessions to exploit natural resources. They can only get it from government, which is an agent of the people. These concessions are not obtained from the principals, from us. No foreign company comes to engage us that it engages government. The foreign companies do not do whatever they can to obtain concessions on the most favorable terms possible, including bribing and exerting pressure on government. This is said by Stiglitz, the famous economist. This is probably what prompted Professor Akilekpa Sawyer to advocate for the establishment of an independent committee of experts to review mining agreements before ratification to ensure that the national interest is captured. This advocacy was consequent upon the revelation during a Public Accounts Committee hearing that Newmont Ghana had been granted the right to repatriate or retain 100% of its earnings from its operations. 100% of its earnings. International mining and oil companies have historically benefited from asymmetries of information and asymmetry of bargaining power. They have used these levers to capture most of the natural resources in less developed and developing countries. In Ghana and many other developing countries, the asymmetry of information is aggravated where citizens of the country have little to no information about the extractive industry-related activities in which government engages in. Unless citizens understand better how much money is flowing in and to where, the asymmetry will persist. So transparency and accountability could be a cure to this malice. The recent discussion on the lithium mining agreement also exemplifies these asymmetries. As stated by a civil society organization on the revised agreement. For a mine that remains profitable, even at current prices, slashing royalties is not reform. It is surrender. How other countries have dealt with their natural resources, a comparative analysis. Sector governance in mining generally refers to the legal, institutional, and regulatory frameworks that guide the mining industry to ensure it operates legally, transparently, and responsibly. Effective governance requires clarity in strategic objectives. Like I said, intentionality and deliberateness in the pursuit of our goals. Accountability, transparency, and the engagement of all stakeholders, government, private companies, and civil society, to manage environmental and social impacts while equitably distributing benefits. It is worth noting that where these government institutions in the mining sector are weak and corrupt, or where there is lack of transparency and accountability, or where the government institutions are not inclusive, the mining sector will not be able to deliver expected benefits to the nation. According to the Natural Resource Governance Institute, in its 2021 report, the oil and gas sector returns much higher benefits to Ghana than the mining sector, largely because of the legal and regulatory frameworks that regulate the oil and gas sector. It recommends that government should take advantage of the current review of the Minerals and Mining Act 2006, Act 703 as amended, to strengthen sector governance in the extractive sector. Writing in the Tribune of November 15th, just 2 days ago, 2025, Saeed Muhammad Ali, a Pakistani academic, noted that mineral-driven growth has shown some risk. Corruption, elite capture, widening inequality, environmental damage, and conflicts. He observed that some countries have tried to capture more value from domestic resources and advance industrial policies by restructuring or restricting or banning the export of minerals, especially critical minerals. While some countries like Bolivia and Zambia have instead sharply raised export taxes, royalties, and fees. For countries like Ghana, the surge in global demand for critical minerals represent an opportunity to advance growth and development. Yet, while exporting critical minerals may generate substantial revenue for the country, translating these gains into broad societal benefits could prove challenging for an economy captured by entrenched interests. The Norway United Kingdom experience: one resource, two trajectories, different outcomes. Norway and the UK are neighbors, separated only by the North Sea, with huge oil and gas reserves. Both of these countries discovered their oil and gas deposits around about the same time. The UK was a fairly advanced country at the time of the discovery of their hydrocarbons, whilst Norway was a small economy based on fishing and shipping. Today, Norway is the richest country in the world, whilst the United Kingdom had to be bailed out by the IMF in the 1970s. The UK's oil bonanza was largely squandered. So the question is, what accounts for this difference? This probably comes down to sector governance, how Norway dealt with their natural resources, or oil, and how UK dealt with their oil, their natural resource. Norway, right from the onset, knew that striking oil is no guarantee for success. Norway laid down the principle that the natural resource must be used to make a qualitatively better society, to make Norway a qualitatively better society. As such, the ownership of the resource was critical to capturing its value. Consequently, Norway took a conscious, deliberate decision to retain 70% ownership of the oil fields and companies. Under Margaret Thatcher, an adherent of free market economy, British Oil, Brit Oil, and BP, British Petroleum, were all privatized in the 1980s. So you see the trajectory. While Norway was exercising control, state control over its resource, Britain was consigning its state resource to the private sector. The outcome: the overall tax rate on oil in Norway is 78%. So the argument that if you impose taxes on your natural resources, you won't find investment, or it will drive away people who want to invest, cannot be true. Until recently, the oil tax rate in the United Kingdom has been around 40%. Norway invested the proceeds of oil in a sovereign wealth fund, which currently stands at 1.4 trillion United States dollars. 1.4 trillion that small fishing country, shipping and fishing country, has now got a sovereign fund from their oil that is 1.3 or 1.4 trillion United States dollars. The biggest in the world. Privatization receipts for the UK stood at 67 billion British pounds. When they sold their oil, the oil they got was 67 billion pounds. This was used to fund tax cuts. That's how they spent their money. So high-income earners, they were given tax breaks. And the money that they got through privatization was used as consumption to fund the tax cuts. It helped that Norway was patient. There wasn't any hunger to fund tax cuts or provide short-term political benefits in Norway. So if we are going to, there must be that intentionality. We are not going to spend our natural resource money this way. The United Arab Emirates. Normally, we call what we all know is Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, but it's a group of countries or towns that make up the United Arab Emirates. During a government dialogue series in 2013, Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum stated that, and I quote, "The government's job is to achieve happiness for its people." The UAE's story begins not with abundance, but with scarcity. For centuries, the region's primary natural resource were the pearls and its strategic location for trade. The economy was subsistence-based and development was minimal. The discovery of oil in commercial quantities offshore Abu Dhabi in 1958 and later in other parts of the Emirates fundamentally and irrevocably altered this trajectory. The challenge was never simply about extracting wealth from the ground. It was about transforming that finite subterranean capital into permanent above-ground prosperity. These initial decades following the first oil exports in 1962 were focused on state building and foundational infrastructure. So they knew exactly where to put the money. Recognizing the volatility of oil markets and the finite nature of the resource, the UAE in the 2000s embarked on an ambitious and deliberate strategy of economic diversification with the sole aim of building a multiple non-oil pillar or building multiple non-oil pillars for the economy in tourism and real estate, trade and logistics, renewable energy and sustainability. Currently, the UAE strategy is encapsulated in narratives like "We are UAE" in 2021 and UAE Centennial 2071, which focuses on building a post-hydrocarbon knowledge economy. In the early part of this presentation, I stated that it is important to look at natural resources as an asset and not as income-producing activity in the nature of renewable natural resource, like cocoa, like oil palm. We shouldn't look at natural resources, our minerals, our oil, in that light, because that could be dangerous for us. Even with non-renewable, or even with a renewable natural resource, many factors can limit the ability of the resource to renew itself. Consequently, prudent utilization of resources is incumbent on all governments and managers of the economy. This is because once the resource is extracted, it is gone. Once you take it, it's gone. If it is consumed as recurrent expenditure, one might be unable to see the tangible benefits of the exploitation of the resource. This is why the UAE took a bold decision, keenly aware of the fact that their oil resource will be depleted. And today is depleted. And so transform the oil resources into developing the country into a tourism and hospitality hub. Today, it is not oil receipts that drive the economy of UAE. It is the investments that have been made in the country through the utilization of the oil receipts. Same cannot be said of Venezuela. Huge oil reserves, no tangible benefits. The people are still living in squalor and poverty. Iran, a little better, but a regime that is largely unaccountable to the people. Libya, huge oil reserves in Africa. The nation has not been transformed. Nigeria, our next door neighbor, huge. What do you see? Nigerians are everywhere seeking greener pastures. Equatorial Guinea, huge oil reserves. And to some extent, Russia. They will use it to enrich a few, elite capture of the resource. All these countries have huge reserves, but failing economies. So let's look at the mineral and mining policy of Ghana and the African mining vision, a paradigm for structural transformation. Mr. Chairman, the African mining vision was adopted by heads of states at the February 2009 AU Summit, following the October 2008 meeting of African ministers responsible for mineral resource development. It is Africa's own response to tackling the paradox of great mineral wealth existing side by side with pervasive, persistent poverty. African Mining Vision is not merely a policy document. It is a continental response to the paradox, the resource curse. For decades, Africa's immense mineral wealth, hosting about 30% of the world's natural mineral reserves, has consisted has coexisted with pervasive poverty, inequality, and economic instability in many resource-rich countries. The pre-African mining vision mining model was largely characterized by enclave economies, where capital-intensive extraction operated in isolation with minimal backward or forward linkages to local economies, significant fiscal leakages, and other devastating social and economic and environmental consequences. The African mining vision is a direct and sophisticated rebuttal to this model. Its core thesis is that mining extraction must cease to be an end in itself. It must instead become a catalyst for broad-based, sustainable socio-economic development and structural transformation. The Ghana mining vision, or mining policy. The Minerals and Mining Policy of Ghana was published in 2014 as a declaration of a framework of principles and policies that will guide government in the management of the mining and mineral sector to improve sustainable development by diversifying mineral production, establishment of the Minerals Development Fund, promoting local content, and establishing a market liberal regime designed to attract foreign direct investment. The cornerstone of Ghana's modern regulatory framework is the Minerals and Mining Act of 2006, Act 703, and its subsequent amendments. The Gold Board Act 2025, Act 1140, along policies like Minerals and Mining Policy of Ghana 2014, and legislative instruments such as the Minerals and Mining General Regulations 2012, LI 2173, and the Minerals and Mining Local Content and Participation Regulations 2020, LI 2431. Ghana's implementation of the African mining vision. As Africa's leading gold producer, Ghana presents a compelling case study. Its mining sector, while historically significant, has grappled with the very challenges the African mining vision identifies: limited local linkages, revenue volatility, and social conflicts, notably with artisanal and small-scale mining sectors. Ghana's journey with the African mining vision reveals a landscape of ambitious policy intentions, grappling with complex on-the-ground realities. The country has been a pioneer, particularly in crafting legislative frameworks for local content, demonstrating that African states can actively shape the mining sector's local economic impact. The country has taken important first steps, establishing a policy architecture that aligns with the African mining aspirations, African mining vision's aspirations. The future now depends on strengthening governance, building institutional capacity, and maintaining the political will to navigate the inevitable trade-offs. The transformation, Ghana from a mineral extracting nation to a mineral harvesting one, where the wealth truly seeds a diversified and sustainable economy, is the ultimate prize and the African mining vision, together with lessons from nations with natural resources, remain the most credible map to reach that transformation. Ghana's response to challenges identified by the African mining vision. Mr. Chairman, we have been a top global producer of gold, yet the paradox of plenty, where resource wealth does not equitably translate into broad development, has persisted. To deal with this fundamental problem and the economic and regulatory challenges associated with the mining sector, the government, and particularly since January 2005, has rolled out groundbreaking reforms which represent a decisive break from the past. These reforms are groundbreaking not for any single policy, but for the systematic, integrated, and digitally enforced nature. These bold reforms include, like I said, the passing of the Ghana Gold Board Act. To appreciate this reform, we must first understand the systematic failure it seeks to address. The previous system was fragmented, with multiple agencies overseeing licensing, revenue collection, environmental monitoring, and mineral marketing. This led to regulatory incoherence, revenue leakage, leading to an estimated annual loss of about $1.5 billion in potential $1.5 billion in potential revenue, foreign exchange earnings, ineffective price stabilization, and environmental and social governance deficits. The Gold Board legislation consolidates authority under a single technically proficient institution with a clear dual mandate: economic stabilization and sector formalization. The Act constitutes the Gold Board as the sole mandated buyer and assayer of gold in the country, with clear statements to clear intention to criminalize any contravention of its provisions. This move has been described as a formalization of the artisanal and small-scale mining sector, as it links the sale of gold directly to compliance, i.e., to sell to the board. Miners must demonstrate adherence to environmental management plans and prove the legal provenance in their gold. That is, whether their gold was won through the legally approved method. That is, whether they obtained licenses to produce the gold. This reform has, by a single act, granted Ghana the power to exercise permanent sovereignty over minerals won by the small-scale and artisanal mining sector in the country, which has led to the record high return on gold sales up to the sum of $8 billion as opposed to the sum of 6.4 billion realized by the large-scale mining companies. Establishment of the National Anti-Mining Operations Secretariat. The establishment of the National Anti-Illegal Mining Operations Secretariat, NIMOS, represents a critical juncture, a deliberate and structural intervention aimed at confronting a crisis that has for decades eroded our national patrimony, our environment, and our future, our very future. NIMO serves as the operational nerve center for Ghana's fight against illegal small-scale mining and its associated environmental destruction, particularly in water bodies and forest reserves. It embodies Ghana's coordinated response to the scourge of illegal mining, integrating security, environment, and legal responses into a unified operational strategy. Engagement of small-scale miners with the opportunity to transition and upgrade into medium-scale miners. In the recent engagement between the Minerals Commission and the Ghana National Association of Small-Scale Miners, there has been discussion on the transition of artisanal and small-scale miners to the mid-tier mining stream upon satisfaction of qualification criteria as part of government's priority. Renewal or removal of automatic renewal of mining leases. Further sector reforms are being carried out in the mining sector. Mention must be made of the removal of automaticity in the renewal of mining leases. The prevailing practice has been that mining leases were granted for not less than 30 years, subject to renewal for another 30 years or a similar period. This is no longer the case. A mining company applying for a renewal or extension of an existing mining lease or an extension or an extension of an existing mining lease must demonstrate compelling reasons for the removal or renewal to be granted. The policy reform could signal the beginning of a paradigm shift in the treatment of our natural resources. The Daman mine is a case study. The Daman mine, located in the Half region, is a case in point. When the price of gold was low on the international market, Newmont Ghana, the owners of the mine, approached government with a proposal to further develop the mine to be more productive. Government, after studying the proposal, entered into a development agreement with Newmont Ghana. During the currency of their development agreement, government waived all taxes for Newmont Ghana. However, an audit conducted at the mine or on the mine recently revealed that Newmont did not invest in the development of the mine. Consequently, government has signaled its intention to take over the mine, which is presently in the transition phase. So government officers and Newmont are working towards the eventual taking over of the mine by government. The takeover is expected to happen in April 2026. Community Development Fund. As further reforms in the governance sector. Companies, as part of their corporate social responsibility, have been spending portions of their revenue in intervening in communities in which they operate. The selection of community projects under this arrangement has been discretionary and prone to abuse. A case in point was when a mining company decided to build a golf course as part of its corporate social responsibility. How does a golf course benefit a rural community. But that was corporate social responsibility. Odrusa will tell you that money spent on corporate social responsibility is deductible. I turn my attention now to the sub-teams. And I propose to start with a discussion with the supposed difference between prior approval and ratification. The subject received significant treatment in the paper delivered by Professor Mike Eron Okwe on Tuesday, 23rd September 2025, which I have had the benefit of reading. I have nothing significant or useful to add to the erudite treatment of the effects of ratification or non-ratification of a mining lease. Ratification is and ought to be a condition precedent for the validity of a mining agreement. That condition must be met before a mining agreement can be valid. That's what the Constitution and the Minerals and Mining Act says. The rationale is founded on the principal-agent relationship, where public notice is given to the world that the agent in the grant of a concession to extract natural resources in this country cannot bind the principal. It's notice to the world. The real owners, the principal, the real owners of the resource. This is the case where the principal reserves the right to approve of an action of the agent or disapprove of same. This the principal does through their representatives in parliament. Nowhere in the Constitution of the Republic of Ghana is there an exception to this rule. And I shudder to think that there could be any exception to the rule contained in a statute. Any such exception might risk being struck down as unconstitutional. And in relation to the mining of natural resources in Ghana, any exception in the nature of prior approval of a minister stipulated by statute might also introduce uncertainties in the legal regime of the mining sector. Generally, where the law creates an obligation for an organization or entity to seek the prior approval of another, the law stipulates how the said approval is to be obtained and on whom the obligation is placed. I've had the opportunity of perusing a model mining lease agreement, which template contains provisions to the effect. And clause 1 of the model mining lease says grant of mineral rights. E. The mining lease is subject to ratification by Parliament. This mining lease is subject to ratification by Parliament in accordance with Article 2681 of the Constitution and Section 54 of Act 703. Upon execution of this agreement or this lease, mining lease, the minister shall cause the mining lease to be laid in Parliament for ratification. Thus, it appears to me that the responsibility of laying the mining lease before Parliament for ratification falls on the minister. Again, clause 1G of the model mining lease agreement provides the company shall, in accordance with Section 69 of Act 703 and Regulations 20 of the Minerals and Mining General Regulations 2012, LI 2173, commence commercial production of mineral, not later than 24 months from the date of the grant of the mining lease. It is worth noting that the clause does not subject the operationalization of the mining lease agreement to Article 2611 and Section 5.4 of Act 703, as stipulated under Clause 1E. With respect to the ratification of the mining lease by Parliament, this Clause 1G appears to be a standalone provision, and this could explain why there has been the wanton abuse of the ratification provisions in both the Constitution and the Statute. A redrafting of the clause could bring clarity to the regime unless we are entitled to think that it is within the contemplation of the parties that ratification should be secured within 24 months after the grant of a mining lease. Secondary and marginal mining in Norway. Extracting oil from Norway's biggest oil fields has lower unit costs and therefore profitable. Consequently, Norway keeps an eye on the production capacity of its oil fields. When oil reaches the maximum capacity, or when oil fields reach the maximum capacity and begin to decline, the country scales down the input costs to still make those wells profitable. They also move the activity to local companies, firstly to build their capacity by transferring knowledge and also engender local participation in the exploitation of the resource. This could be a useful lesson for Ghana to build the capacity of Ghanaian medium-scale mining companies or companies in the extractive sector generally. Windfall tax. In or around 2012, gold prices skyrocketed. Gold prices were hitting between $1,600, that is $1,600 to $1,800 an ounce. Many of the companies that were operating in Ghana had secured their concessions when gold prices on the international market were significantly lower. Ghana was, however, not sharing in the benefits of the windfall. It was the argument of the country that having modeled the profitability of their companies on the significantly lower gold prices, it stood to reason that with high gold prices, the internal rate of return would improve, and that the country was entitled to share in the benefits. The companies will have none of it. They cited increasing operational costs, eating away the excess income that was coming to the companies by reason of the improved performance on the world market. Ghana lost out woefully. To address this, Ghana must develop a framework that triggers the imposition of this tax. If a project has achieved a predefined threshold of return on the investment, profits above this threshold should be taxed at an additional rate. Conclusion. Let me conclude, Mr. Chairman, by admitting that the debate on whether or not Ghana will return to the IMF the 18th time is not foreclosed. This is more to do, there is more to do to our governance architecture that will reset our approach to doing things in this country and running the affairs of states. The availability of natural resources is not a guarantee for success in a bid to avoid a return to the IMF. And that should be obvious, to all of us. It is totally unacceptable that in the face of abundant wealth, we experience abject and pervading poverty wherever we turn. It is time for a paradigm shift. Natural resources and its availability and exploitation must be a catalyst for growth and development. We must leverage all our resources, both human and material, for this exercise. Many countries have shown that it can be done. Even countries without natural resources, the Asian tigers, have shown that with or without natural resources, a country can be prosperous. The availability of natural resources in this country should be viewed as an added advantage when managed properly. The success of Norway teaches us that where there is sufficient trust in the managers of the economy, where the government is strong and does not fall to short-term political pressures, where the government has a burning desire to allow everyone to benefit from the exploitation of the nation's natural resources, and not a small number in government, where the government does not allow most of the profits realized from the extraction of natural resources to be squandered by multinationals, coupled with the development of strategies for the maximization of the benefits of the exploitation of our natural resources, with a certain degree of intentionality and deliberateness, then we will not only escape the natural resource curse, but we will become prosperous and not see the need to return to the IMF for the 18th time for a bailout. Thank you for your attention.